Hello and welcome everyone. In this course, we will be learning about the history of the English language, and we will be looking at its origins and development throughout time. I will be your course instructor, and I'm a native British English speaker, and I help students all over the world to learn English as a second language. So, why is it important to study the history of the English language today? Well, first of all, English is a global language and is spoken by over 1 billion people in the world. The English that is spoken today is very different to the English that was spoken in the past, and the differences only increase the further we go back in our investigation of this. And since English is a global language, it's very interesting to discover its origins and also how the English language is always changing and continues to change in a globalized world today. What is a language? So, to put it simply, a language is composed of a number of different sounds which are made by the tongue and the other organs of speech. The parts of a spoken language are called the sounds, and the smallest parts of the written language are called letters. Languages are like living beings. They do not stay the same, but they grow. And as a language spreads and grows, it transforms and changes over time. And the story of these changes in a language over time, in our case English, is known as the history of the English language. The written form of a language changes slowly over time, whereas the spoken form of a language changes faster. It's important to note that there are some languages in the world which don't have a written component at all, but are only spoken. So, considering this, we can say that first and foremost, a language is something that is spoken, and the written component of a language is of secondary importance. Languages as organisms. We sometimes speak of a language as being dead or living, as if it's an entity. Why do we do that? And what is a dead or living language? Well, first of all, a dead language is a language that is no longer in everyday spoken use, such as Latin, which doesn't have any native speakers, but is only used in specific contexts. On the other hand, a language is said to be living if it's still spoken in the modern world. A dead language, such as Latin, is found written in books and is unchanged, and will continue to remain unchanged, whereas a living language, such as English, is always changing. Secondly, the reason some linguists consider languages as a living organism is because organisms live, grow, and die, and similarly, if we take the example of the English language, it started to grow around the world, and it's still growing and evolving. Old English, or also known as Anglo-Saxon, is the oldest recorded form of the English language, and it's very different from our modern-day English. Almost as if they were two distinct languages, but fundamentally they are still the same, and modern English differs from the older forms of the English language, similar to how a giant grown tree does from its beginnings as a young tree. So where did English start? Well, first of all, the family to which the English language belongs to is the Indo-European family of languages. Experts believe that the origins of the English language can be traced all the way back to the Neolithic period, which is around 5000 BC, to a prehistoric group of people known as Indo-Europeans or Proto-Indo-Europeans. Experts also think that many of the world's modern languages are derived from the Indo-European language, and that over time this language transformed into the ancient variations of Latin, Greek, and German, and that over time Latin evolved into Spanish, French, and Italian. Ancient German changed into Dutch, Danish, German, Norwegian, Swedish, and then finally into English. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes were three Germanic tribes who invaded Britain during the 5th century, around 449 AD. These three Germanic tribes crossed the North Sea from what we today call Denmark and northern Germany. At the time of their arrival, the people of Britain spoke a Celtic language. Now, before we go on, it's important to note that the language brought over to Britain by these three Germanic tribes has grown and changed immensely since the 5th century. Since it has been growing and evolving for such a long time, it has changed in every way. And when studying, for example, the English of the 5th century, we have to study it almost as if it was a distinct language, because it is so different to the English that we speak today. Now, the main periods in the history of the English language are Old English, also known as Anglo-Saxon, from 450 to 1100 AD, Middle English from 1100 to 1500 AD, Early Modern English from 1500 to 1800 AD, and then the Late Modern English period from 1800 to the present day. Old English 450 to 1100 AD. Now, the name of the land that these Germanic tribes settled in was named Angleland, or England. Many historians are of the opinion that over the course of time these tribes joined together, and that this is a time when the language began to form into what is today known as Old English or Anglo-Saxon. Old English was spoken from 450 to 1100 AD, and native speakers today would have a really hard time understanding this ancient form of English because it was so different to the modern-day English that we speak today. Beowulf is an Old English epic poem which is considered to have great significance in English literary history, and although the exact date is disputed, it is believed to have been written between 700 to 1000 AD. Middle English, 1100 to 1500 AD. The period of Middle English was from around 1100 to 1500 AD. The invasion of England by the Normans, more specifically by William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, which is part of modern-day northern France, introduced many changes into the English language. What were these changes? Well, new French words began to be included in the language. In fact, in some part of the country, English had stopped being written in books, and English existed in its spoken format only. The Normans spoke a rural dialect of French, which became the language of the royal court and the upper classes who spoke French, in comparison to the lower classes who spoke English. The 14th century saw English becoming the dominant language once again, but with the addition of numerous French words, and this resulting language is called Middle English. The 14th century also saw the rich and varied work of Geoffrey Chaucer, considered as one of the first great English poets, and his famous work, The Canterbury Tales, which is written in Middle English. Similar to Old English, native speakers today would have a challenging time understanding this ancient form of English. Early Modern English, 1500 to 1800 AD. The Early Modern English period was from 1500 to 1800 AD, and the 16th century in particular is notable for having the great vowel shift, which meant that during this time, English speakers started to change the way that they pronounced long and short vowels. It's also important to know that from the 16th century onwards, the British had increasing contact with people from all over the world, and this led to the formation of distinct dialects. especially in colonized areas of the world. This, combined with the fact that the 16th and 17th centuries witnessed the English Renaissance, meant that numerous new words and phrases entered the English language, particularly influenced by Latin and Greek. In addition to this, the invention of printing, widely considered as one of history's greatest technological innovations, meant further development in the development of the English language. The invention of printing was important for several reasons, especially as it standardized spelling and grammar. A great example of early modern English is a language used in William Shakespeare's works, who is arguably one of the most famous playwrights of his time. Late modern English, 1800 AD to the present day. The biggest difference between early modern English and late modern English is that late modern English has a considerably larger vocabulary size. The Industrial Revolution and the rise and growth of the British Empire both had considerable impact on the English language. In the case of the Industrial Revolution, there was a need for the addition of new vocabulary to the English language, as these new words were necessary to describe the new technological advancements. And as the British Empire expanded across the globe, new words were introduced to the English language. Today, English is spoken all over the world by over 1 billion people, which includes native and non-native speakers, making it the most widely spoken language in the world. Due to this, English is also widely considered as a global language of business. The future of the English language. So as mentioned earlier, today the English language is spoken all over the world, and it continues to evolve because it is a living language. The English language will continue to transform and evolve over time, and it's really interesting to see how the English language changes in our lifetime and beyond. So we've now come to the end of this course on the history of the English language. First of all, congratulations for finishing the course because there was a lot of information to get through. Secondly, if you're a student who is learning English, then I wish you the best of luck with your English language learning journey, and I will see you in the next course.